all across the university to dine together, but also to have a little bit of light fare as well up here on the stage, as it were. Last month, if you remember, I know there are many people who were here last month. We had it over in the McElhaney Ballroom, as a matter of fact. We interviewed Father Bernie McElhaney himself. Today, we're very fortunate that we have Father Joe McShane, who is a stranger to very few of you, I'm sure, currently the superior of the University of Scranton Jesuit Community. But you may have noticed on your way in a portrait hanging on the wall as he rolls his eyes. It was taken, the portrait was done just a year or two ago, is that correct?
It's my first communion picture.
Right.
Let's be honest about that.
Joe is also a former president of the university, the 23rd president of the University of Scranton. So we'll get into some of these things. I'm not going to provide much of an introduction because some of the questions I have might cover some of those bases. But it really is a great grace to have him with us today and a great grace to have him back here on campus. If I can just put in one plug before we begin. As you know, Advent is right around the corner. And one of the great things that we do in the Jesuit Center is a daily Advent devotional. So be on the lookout from me for an email from me in the next week or two with a little link that you can press to make sure that that devotional ends up in your inbox each morning. It really does provide a great way to start the day. Oftentimes these devotionals focus on the readings of the day from the Catholic Lectionary and other great experiences that the authors throw in there. So it really is a great way to prepare ourselves spiritually for the great feast of Christmas. With that, I'm just going to dive right in. And maybe, Father McShane, I sent you some questions, so we'll try to stick to that for a little bit, and then we'll open it up to the floor for some questions that you may have. But maybe just if you could tell us a little bit about where you're from and your upbringing.
Before I do that, I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank you all for welcoming me back to Scranton. My time at Scranton was a time of great joy for me. I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about how to be a president from you. You were very patient with me, kind to me, but also you kept me, I would say, on the straight and narrow. And there are two women over here who were not hesitant to smack me across the snout when I seemed to be going astray. I won't mention any names, but their initials are Mary Engel and Cheryl Bogan. In doing that, they were actually going against their natural tendency to be just shy and retiring people. But they were great. But it's wonderful. And I want to speak from the heart on this. In the time that I've been away, I always talked Scranton up. I still do. And I tell people to visit Scranton, from other Jesuit institutions, especially in the Northeast, to learn how it's done. And people say to me, what do you mean by that? And I say, well, I can tell you stories about faculty who are very devoted. They're very good scholars, but they never lost their love of the classroom. And they never lost their sense of devotion to the students. So that's something I talk up. Then, when everyone expects a president to talk about the faculty first, and I do. But I also have to say, the staff at Scranton is like staff nowhere else. The men and women who take care of the university here at Scranton are saints. I really mean that. The way in which the buildings are so well kept. I said, not jokingly, to the president of Canisius College, now Canisius University last year, I said, go to Scranton. You can eat off the floors, and I mean that literally. The staff really looks after everyone. And they do it with, I would say, with effortless ease or seemingly effortless ease, but I know they really throw themselves into it with great devotion and great affection. And then the men and women who work in the, in the offices, who are, the assistants or the people who in student affairs really are frontline workers. The focus on students is amazing. And the other thing I say to them, from outside of the valley, that you have to understand, this place is very Catholic. Very Catholic. And I would say unabashedly Catholic and happily Catholic. And students learn, that there's something special here precisely because it's a very very committed Catholic institution. Not a restrictive institution, but I would say a jubilantly Catholic institution. And it shows up in the way in which students are cared for, loved. You know, when I was leaving my last great love, Fordham, I had to interview the 4 finalists. I stayed away from the selection process, but at the end they asked me to visit with and speak with the 4 finalists. And I said to them, what can I tell you? Any question you have, I'll be happy to answer, and I'll tell you the truth, even if it's painful. But after they asked some questions of me, one of them said, "Do you have any questions for me?" And I said, "Yes." And the question is this, and I said it's going to strike you as oddball, or bizarre. And here's the question. Can you love this place? And each one of them said to me that it was the strangest question they had ever been asked. Can you love this place? Which is another way of saying, can you love the people? If you don't love the people, you shouldn't be here. Where did I learn that? I learned that here. That what makes Scranton run, and what makes it jubilantly Catholic and devotedly Jesuit and recognizably Jesuit, is that everybody here buys the proposition that we're about love. That's what sets this place apart. And I don't know if people tell you that enough. So here I am to tell you that. That you make the place what it is. You live the mission. You don't talk about it. You live the mission, and you do it with grace and understated eloquence, but you do it with, I would say, deep, deep devotion, and it shows. This place is it's able to achieve great things because it begins and ends in love. Now, Cheryl Boga, am I wrong on that?
No.
Mary Engel? I can't believe she said that. She never said that to me in the 5 years I worked here. You always screw up, McShane. What's wrong with you? I'm 23. I refer to myself as 23. But yeah, I just wanted to say that up front. And it's from the heart. I have nothing to gain by saying that to you. I really don't. It's the truth. And I want you to know the truth. The truth will set you free, and it will also make you great apostles, disciples, and ambassadors. So I cut you off, and I apologize for that.
You'll notice, no you don't, you'll notice that was a very Jesuitical response. The question was, where are you from? Just say, okay.
From God, who is love. So where am I from? I am not from the Commonwealth. I get a big kick out of that. When I arrived here in '98, I kept referring to the state. And I was taken aside by Jerry Zaboski, he who knows all things about the university, and by Sharon Sport. And they said, please, it's not the state of Pennsylvania. I said, what do you mean it's not the state of Pennsylvania? What are you talking about? It's the Commonwealth, Father. I said, oh, God. I'm not from the Commonwealth. I was born and raised in New York City. I was born and raised in Manhattan. I was born and raised in a small neighborhood in the city, and the neighborhood is Marble Hill. Marble Hill is was a mixed Irish-Jewish neighborhood, and that's fitting. We're a lost tribe, and we know that. We have the same sense of guilt that our neighbors had, and the same devotion to family and devotion to education. So it was a great place to grow up in. I grew up across the street from Holocaust survivors. So we learned, in life about what had happened in Germany. But it's part of Manhattan, even though it's on the Bronx side of the river. So we grew up with a sense of difference, and that was beaten into our heads. We're different. So that was the neighborhood I grew up in. And by the way, people will try to tell you that New York is a huge city. It's wrong. New York is like Scranton. It's a collection of villages. I once made a mistake, by the way, of referring to St. Paul's as St. Paul's in Dunmore. Oh my God, the people in Green Ridge, they took out a contract on my life, for goodness sake. So also in New York, people say, I'm from New York. I'm really from Marble Hill. You identify with the little village that you grew up in. And you knew the boundaries, and you knew who the friends were, and you knew who the people were, that you would turn to for help, or that you would run from, my brothers and I would talk about things like, we lived on Adrian Avenue. I mean, really, Adrian Avenue, Marble Hill. It sounds Pinky's Out, and it was not Pinky's Out at all. But we would make a distinction. We were Upper Adrian, and the kids on Lower Adrian were real thugs. Or as in those days, we would say they were rocks. They were hard guys, voted most likely to own a motorcycle by the age of 12. So I grew up in this neighborhood, which was a great place to grow up. There were tons of kids, so there was always a baseball game or not. We didn't play baseball in my neighborhood. We were rabid Giants fans because we were in Manhattan. When they went west, we became rabid Yankee fans. I'm very disappointed. Very disappointed. But we know, we live with this great burden that the 28th World Championship is the hardest one to get. Because as I see, I'm with Philly fans here. I forgive you, I give you absolution. And so it was a great place to grow up. I went to the parish grammar school. 2,000 kids, 26 nuns, 6 brothers, 2 lay teachers. It was spectacular. And as is the case here in Scranton, your parish was really your identifying entity. Everything revolved around the parish, the school, athletics, and what you learned in school, you heard at home. What you heard at home and in school, you heard from the pulpit. So there was this kind of unified experience of life. And everyone was family. The people on the block were, I didn't have a mother. I had a battalion of mothers. I don't know if you did here growing up. So Mrs. Mullery knew as much about what I was doing right and wrong as my mother did. And she would tell my mother, in case my mother didn't get the telegram, the ways. So it was a wonderful, safe, loving environment. But my family was unusual in this way. This is going to get into something that Dan is going to ask me about. I went to the parish grammar school, then I went to a Jesuit high school in Manhattan. A wonderful school. I had to take the number 1, subway down from 225th to 86th Street. And I'll tell you a story in a second, those of you who are basketball fans. And then I took the 18 crosstown bus. It took me 45 minutes, in public transportation to get to school and then 45 minutes to get home. But just as an aside, and he's going out of his mind here because I'm going off script.
I knew what to expect, I have to say.
I would get on the subway at 225th. And it wasn't subway, it was elevated. At 207th, which was 2 stops down, a guy who in those days was called Lou Alcindor. Who said oh-ho?
Bogo.
So Lou Alcindor is now known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He would get on in 207th. And there I was. I was even smaller than I am now, and I would get on at 225th, and I'd always got a seat. He, at 207th, he could never get a seat. So here he was, over 7 feet tall, and he would stand there like this, And my heart went out to him. Not so much that I give up my seat, but my heart went out to him. Here I was comfortable, and he was not. That lasted from September to December of my freshman year in high school. In mid-December, Powell Memorial came to play Regis High School at Regis in basketball. It wasn't pretty. We lost 84-34. So after that, I used to sit on the subway like this and just look at him. I seated and he uncomfortable. He deserved to be uncomfortable, with a 50-point difference there. But the unusual thing about my family is that I have 3 uncles and 2 cousins who are priests in the Archdiocese of New York. To make it even funnier, my Uncle Vinny on my father's side, so Vincent McShane, was a classmate of Jack Shelley, who was my mother's brother. They were classmates in the seminary. So my parents met through their priestly brothers. Now this is unusual, don't you think? I think it's unusual. So there were 3 uncles who were archdiocesan priests and 2 cousins. One of whom worked at Fordham when Dan was there. Tom Shelley wrote the history of Fordham, the history of the Archdiocese. He was a great, great historian. Died about 1.5 years ago. Wonderful guy. And then I had a Jesuit cousin. So, I jokingly say to people when I'm introduced as Father McShane, I said, look, it's Joe. Or here, I'm 23. Because Father is not a baptismal name in my family. But there are 7 of us who ended up, dressed like this. And that's somewhat unusual. When I was young, back in the last millennium, I can't even just say back in the last century, it's the last millennium, for goodness sake. It was common, really, to have large numbers of kids from Jesuit high schools graduate and enter the society. So in my entering class in Poughkeepsie, in the place which is now the Culinary Institute of America, CIA, the good CIA, the tasty CIA, there were 5 of us from the same high school class. And the year ahead of us, there were 6 from my high school. And 10 years before I entered, there were like 20. It was a common thing. You would enter right out of high school. We don't do that anymore because people are not prepared to make a lifetime commitment at the age of 18 at this point in history. In those days, I don't know if we were all ready for it either, but there was something about the culture that kind of carried us along. Now I entered with 35 other guys. Now only 5 were from my high school, but there were 35 of us in the entering class. And now we only have 5.5 left. The half is a guy who was a Jesuit for 7 years, left and became a Carthusian. Do you ever drink chartreuse? No. All right, good. It's 180 proof. It'll knock your head right off your shoulders. But he was the man in charge of the distillery. He left, the Carthusians came back and became a diocesan priest. So we say he's, half a Jesuit. Well, he's not. He's bigger than life. But only 6 guys stayed out of 35 who entered. And, because it was, we entered at a time of tremendous upheaval and transition in the life of the church and in the life of religious orders. I'll give you some numbers. When I entered in 1967, I was 2 years old. My parents couldn't get rid of me fast enough. The Society of Jesus Worldwide was roughly 36,000. Of those 36,000, 8,000 were from the United States. That's huge. And of the 8,000, 1,460 were from my home province, which was the province of New York. The province of New York consisted of New York State, 4 counties in northern New Jersey. We tried to get rid of them, but they stuck with us. And then the Carolina Marshall Islands, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Strange combination. Now, so that was the size. And we had about 500 guys in formation who had entered and were not yet ordained or weren't in final vows. Now, and back then, New York had 1,460, New England had about 1,200, and Maryland had about 800. So about 3,000. Fast forward, or slow forward. There are now about 15,000 Jesuits in the world rather than 36,000. 1,750 of them are from the United States. And in what was the Maryland, New York, and New England provinces, there's now one province with 552 men. We have more men over 90 than under 30, more men over 80 than under 40. So it's a very different world that we're in. And so, this is one thing I did want to say. People say, you took vows and that was it. No. You have to recommit every day. I mean that. You really have to kind of discern every day how things are going and so on. It's not, not earth-shattering, but you can't live with just a decision made, 50 years ago or 40 years ago. And we have to be honest about that with ourselves, that the choice, the decision has to be made over and over again with freedom, and I would say with deep conviction, a lot of joy, but also, you look around, you realize, I said recently, I gave a talk at Fordham for the Orthodox Catholic dialogue. I said, my way of life may die out in my generation. I don't think so. It's a provocative line and gets people talking. But, we're smaller now. So that's what I came out of, a very close-knit community in Marble Hill, over into Kingsbridge, but never up to Riverdale. They were real pinkies out. We were not. And then a high school experience, which was a remarkable experience. We were surrounded by people who were like-minded, and we had a lot of young Jesuits, who worked in the school at the time. And we were always told, I don't know if you look at the quotation that I threw in this building back in 2000. I think we opened in 2000 in this building. I think, right? And there's a cleverness about the entrances. One side, Brennan Hall, the Kenya School of Management. The other entrance is the Kenya School of Management, Brennan Hall. We had 2 donors we had to keep happy, just saying. But where was I going with that? I don't know.
Your quote.
The quote. I put it here, and I put it at Fordham as well, in the campus center. Of those to whom much is given, much is expected. The most frightening line in all of Scripture, as far as I can see. Of those to whom much is given, much is expected. And the high school I went to, it was tuition free. We made out like bandits, and we got a world-class education. And that was drilled into us almost every day. Of those to whom much is given, much is expected. Cough it up. Do the right thing. Serve others. Don't be about yourself. And that, so that made it kind of easier, to go through a discernment process that led to the society. But then when I entered, you go through different stages. I entered, I was in Poughkeepsie for 2 years, delightful years. A guy who grew up in Manhattan. We didn't have playgrounds. We played in the streets, and there I was at the age of 18 on a piece of property that had 750 acres. 750 acres, my God. Trees, they had trees, and so we stayed there. And then I was sent to Boston College. I make that statement by design. I didn't go to Boston College. I was sent to Boston College to study philosophy, and then I fought it tooth and nail. I didn't want to leave New York. And the provincial said, "You're too attached to New York." How could anyone be too attached to New York? I didn't understand that at all. So I was sent there. And then for my first teaching assignment, I was sent to Buffalo. I wanted to go back to New York. I wanted to, in one of the 6 schools in metropolitan New York. You're going to Buffalo. Why? Because you're too attached to New York again. What are you, nuts? I mean, it's New York. It's the capital of the world. How come on? Anyway. And then I wanted to go back to Boston to study theology. I was sent to Berkeley. Why? Apparently I was too attached to Boston, and I didn't even know it.
That's a new one.
But my point here was, for me, it was very important for me not to get my own way. It was very important for me to be sent places. It was very important for me to discover that God was there ahead of me, and was chuckling at this whole thing, as I would, I want to go. Yeah, you can want whatever you want, but you're going here. And I discovered, you can serve God, you can find God, rejoice in God, and serve Him anywhere, because He's here, He's ahead of us. Pope Francis is very clear on this. Typical Jesuit. We think, we're really good, but when we get someplace, we discover God's there already. So that was important for me. And then after that, I had a deliriously happy year as a young priest in a retreat house. And I preached about this on Sunday as a true story. Someone said to me, yeah, really? No, it's true. And then I went to studies. I taught for years 11 years, deliriously happy years at Lemoyne in Syracuse, just 2 hours away from here. And then I was asked to do probably, one of the most significant and consequential things I've ever, been asked to do, and that's to leave the classroom and serve as a dean. And you can't tell anyone this, all right? Or you can treat it as a Jesuit secret. You know what a Jesuit secret is? You can only tell it to one person at a time. So I was so unsure of this that I went to the dean and the president of Lemoyne, and I said, please, I don't know if this is going to work. So can I just have a 3-year leave of absence so I can come back if I'm a complete flop? And, both the dean and the president were Jesuits, and said, yeah. But the die was cast, I left the classroom in '92 and have never been back, which is painful. But anyhow, that was a very long answer to a very simple question. What's your next question?
Well, for those of you who were here last month with Father Mack, you're noticing a trend here. In an hour and a half on the stage, I've asked 3 questions total, and we've gotten that far. Maybe Father McShane's term as superior is 6 years, so we might make this either an annual or a semesterly appearance here, and we can get through 1 question a year, and then that'll service the entire length of your term.
So you're signed up for at least another 10, is that it?
At least, yes, at least, yeah. Perhaps maybe we can open it up to the audience. We have about 7 minutes left, so I want to make sure if we have audience questions. Why am I not surprised? Boga, please.
Teach a class here?
Non-simultaneous. One of the things that is odd right now, there are a lot of odd things. I now seem to have entered into the consultative phase of my life. So I'm on 5 boards. Santa Clara, SLU, UD, Mercy, the Bloomberg Foundation, and my favorite, the Vatican Observatory. Hello.
Few of them meet on Sunday nights. You can teach a class. We'll talk about this.
Am I the only person in the room afraid when she says that?
It'd be wonderful for the kids.
I don't know. That's a torture.
And for vocation.
Other questions? Anybody that's Andrea?
You discern in the morning and you find that maybe you're not on the path you thought you should be on. How do you get yourself back?
Did you hear the question? If you get up in the morning and you're not sure if you're on the right track, what do you do? Well, part of it is I have to look carefully at what, there's been patterns in my life, and the one pattern I can't ever trust is selfishness. So I have to, be honest and say, well, yeah, I'd like to maybe do something else, but, what's the greater good? What's for the greater glory of God? And because he's treated me very well, better than I deserve, and he hasn't asked much, except, that New York thing, I'm going to have to talk to him, on that day that, we meet face to face. And what the heck is wrong with you, But that's what you have to do. You have to be honest. I think honest and part of the honesty is you have to see the question in the context of your, the whole life. There are certain things I would be terrible at, a lot of things, Find the right path and be, be happy in it. That's a great question, though. But it is a day-to-day thing. Yes.
Please.
So other than the buildings and the surroundings, short time here right now, have you noticed any differences in the community, or is it the same as when you were here as president?
Well, that's an excellent question. One of my all-time favorites, one of my heroes, she always has been, you know that. I told you that when I got back and saw you on the street, and I was delighted and surprised. Mary Kate, the only change really is that I don't know everybody. When I left, I pretty much knew everybody on the staff and everyone on the faculty. But time marches on, and people leave, people are called home, people get better job offers, or so they think, and they go. But there are enough faces and presences that it's a very recognizable place. And I do get a kick out of one member of the security staff who was taken to calling me Monsignor. Really? Really? On that, by the way, you all know Monsignor Joe Quinn? Just about everyone in Scranton knows Joe Quinn. I stole him from the Diocese of Scranton. He was at Fordham for 6 years as the Vice President for Mission and Ministry. Monsignor Quinn. And one day, there was it might have been a FedEx delivery, or it might have been, United States Postal Service delivery. The guy came into the administration building and was looking for this particular person. And so the address was MSGR Joseph G. Quinn. So the guy comes in and says to Dorothy, "Where can I find Master Sergeant Quinn?" And she said, "What?" And the guy pointed, she said, "That means Monsignor." "Really?" I was sure it was Master Sergeant. So, there's a great continuity, but there's also the enrichment of new faces and new enthusiasm. But at base, I have to say, Mary Kay, it very much is the same place. There are new buildings. The place, we just had open house, the second open house. Big crowd on Saturday and Sunday, and which was great to see. Because right now, and this is one of the questions, there are too many colleges in the Northeast and not enough young kids. So everybody has to show off itself to best advantage. And I'm telling you, Scranton shows off to best advantage very well. The cleanliness, the order, the kindness that people run into when they're here sells the place. It really does. And I see that, and I see that great strength is still here. That characteristic goodness. There's a goodness to Scranton, which is another way of saying there's a goodness to the people of Scranton, which is why, can you love the place, is the question. And, I would say that to the parents. I don't do that anymore. Father Maria, who is spectacular, doing a spectacular job, wonderful job, a great pastor, a wonderful president, and a great fundraiser. He has to do that. But, when I was at Fordham, I would say to the parents, your son or daughter is going to get a world-class education here now, put up with it. Your son or daughter is going to get a world-class education here in the capital of the world. That's as humble as a New Yorker can be. But you have to understand, part of the reason is we're going to love them. And people I'm telling you, do not expect to hear that in a gym in the Bronx. Send your kid here and we'll love the kid. Really? Where's the joke? Where's the the disappearing platform, all that sort of stuff. But here it makes sense. People see it, which is another way. I'm ending as I'm beginning. I want you to know how good you are at what you do, and how what you do and how good you are at what you do sells the place without selling it. There's a natural goodness about it. Does the place have, fights, skirmishes, disagreements, quarrels? Yeah. I didn't want to canonize you. You're saintly, but saintly in your own way, and saintly with imperfections. Imperfections are the things that make us interesting, anyhow. So next question. Did I answer that, Mary Kay?
If you think he's kidding about what he would say as university president, we met about 20 years ago when I was a prospective high school senior, and I ended up attending Fordham, and I went kicking and screaming to the spring preview day. And during that presentation in the gym, Father McShane looked up, and I swear he was looking right at me, and said, "Here at Fordham," and you can say the same thing, "here at Scranton, we refuse to insult you with low expectations." That just stuck with me. I put that on my syllabus to this day. I teach every semester here. That is what we are all about as Jesuit higher education. That's what we're all about here at the University of Scranton. We are at time. I thank you all for being here. I thank you all for refusing to insult your colleagues, your students, your friends with low expectations. And we're very grateful for everyone here, and we're very grateful for you, Father McShane. So thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Just be good to one another and know how good you are. All right, promise me?